Finding the former Imperial Navy Gloriana battleship would have been quite hard without the aid of a certain Catan, a cheater who cheats and can look through stable warp gates to observe a different part of the galaxy as if using a telescope. It was simply laying in orbit above a maiden world named Dread Pearl, and inhabited by the descendants of the Navy crew, all kinda crazy and useless to me. I decided to simply deposit the former crew on the surface, hid the giant ship in my tesseract, beside the Blackstone Fortress, and continued on my way, heading towards the Orc worlds of Hundred Teeth. Left unchecked, these orcs would certainly become a dangerous pest, and they already had thousands of small ships and a couple bigger ones, for example a space hulk called Fist of Gork and a massive battle cruiser named the Worldbreaker. None of the humanity's forces in the expanse would be able to deal with them, and that left me. And here, without any witnesses, I could cheat too. Entire orc planets became empty while the system sun grew a bit brighter for a second. No doubt the orcs would spawn again, or appear from a warp rift, but not these. These orcs burned as sacrifice for the good emperor of mankind, Adam, first of his name. It seems he really was that Adam too, since he was quite old. My tesseract captured the orc ships, even the Worldbreaker, but that space hulk was still too massive for my powers. We had to break it into 30 fragments, before the tesseract was able to lock onto the shattered pieces and bring them in. Expensive use of torpedoes and nova shells, but just the metal alone could serve to construct 1,000 battleships. I'll have to inventory the contents later, as there was too much. An entire Astartes chapter fleet, with full stores of Land Raider tanks and Thunderhawk gunships and power armor suits, but no sign of people aboard those 66 mangled ships. The Firehawks chapter 2. I didn't really need all this, but if the Emperor wanted to give me gifts, I could only humbly accept them. I knew those guys were just fine at the side of the Emperor, in an undead burning immortal angel kind of just fine. Unceasing duty, in perpetuity for the Legion of the Damned. Was I too jaded? Perhaps, but the horrors of the 40k universe were starting to get to me. Even more so when my fleet stumbled onto a trading void station filled with desecrated bodies and bloody marks of chaos rituals. I could only send the station into the sun, and vow to avenge their deaths. I did have navigators after all, and a couple of them could track sense in the immaterium. By next week, we found them, a chaos group called the Sane Clan, formed around a band of traitor space marines and a dozen chaos cultists, dealing in slaughter and ritual sacrifice. Then even had a decent-sized fleet, 4 battle barges and 30 cruisers plus 200 escorts, but that only fed the nearest sun with extra atoms to burn. The sooner I had enough blanks to fill all the Astartes chapters the better. Not that I wasn't doing my fucking duty every single day, with 7 women in a row, and the same for my children, and their children. We all worked hard to save the damn galaxy, and all I heard was that I was too lucky. It wasn't luck that brought me here in the blasted expanse, hunting down traitors and orcs. Anyway, it was time to head back, and steal one last battleship, the Majestic Light. This might mean a hard fight with other Imperial factions or Chaos forces involved in the Antian sector. My nurse, Catherine, sensed my muscles tense, and resumed her massage, pouring more oil on my back and helping me relax with gentle fingers. "There's going to be another battle, my lord?" she asked in a knowing voice. "Very likely, my dear Catherine. And I promise I won't cheat, unless they cheat first," I answered in a joking tone. "It's not cheating if the God Emperor raids you in battle, Lord Lancefire. Now turn around, and let me help you relax," she demanded while pouring oil over her breasts. That did seem a great way to relax indeed. I enjoyed her special massage with a dreamy grin, until my spear raised for battle for the 8th time today. "Oh, it looks like it's my lucky day," the former Adeptus Auroritas quipped with a wide smile and eagerly impaled herself on my lance. I let her enjoy her hard-earned prize, because she'll soon switch places with Helena and join my daughter Andrea and the Infocyte on the recruiting job. Sadly, most of the rogue traders they'd found were not interested in any alliance, too suspicious or corrupt or both. Even on footfall, there were 5 rogue traders that barely escaped with their lives, mostly because they were too destitute to commit big crimes. But that winter scale was really too much, preying on his fellow men with casual indifference and even selling convoy routes to pirates and corsairs to kill off the competition, if he didn't do it himself, hidden from prying eyes. I didn't mind them trading with Xenos or using their weapons, as it was clearly in the mandate, and I did that myself very often. But too many such dynasties dealt in slavery, piracy and drug trades, which meant selling imperial citizens to aliens, even to be served as food. That was not okay, nor was sponsoring various heretic cults and deals with chaos forces. On the way back, we made a stop at Lucian's Breath, where the Winterscale dynasty had a gigantic operation in mining nephium, a psychoactive drug extremely addictive and expensive. "Everyone on the surface, drop everything and evacuate the planet right now," I demanded on the Voxcaster, while stealing all the weapons I could find, plus all the STC containers filled with processed nephium. Soon after, my fleet began opening fire with lances on the more distant mining pits and wells, forcing the workers to evacuate faster. In less than a day, 1 million workers embarked on transport ships and ran for Footfall, while the planet burned in their wake. The price of nephium would skyrocket soon enough, and then my surveillance girls will find the nephium traders very fast, and then kill them and steal their thrones. Then find the buyers and watch them, and so on. A death cult was very useful for things like this, because death was their profession. We passed by Footfall and then the Jericho Moor_Warp_ Gate, ignored Port Wonder and its fabulous wonders and headed straight for the Corruptus Warp Rift in the Antian sector. "Captain, there is a demon world behind the rift. It's called Braxas and can't look anymore. Horrible things there, as you can imagine." The navigator spoke on the Vox channel as my fleet held station some 40,000 kilometers away from the huge purple rift. I couldn't imagine what the navigator saw, but I trusted him enough. If he said it was horrible, it was possibly much worse. So I glanced to the side, where veteran Brother Semnai was clenching his left fist so hard that his glove was creaking. "Wanna lead a deep strike and burn that place, Brother Semnai?" I asked, a bit curious. The man turned to stare at me for a second. "If that's how you decide to spend my life, Master Lancefire," he replied while his eyes began turning black. "Maybe a tiny bit too angry?" I nodded cheerfully. "It will be amazingly fun, and you get to launch an exterminatus on a demon world. What say you?" "I say, it better be the best fun in my life, my lord. I never had a lover though." "Too late for that, huh?" the veteran lamentor mused melancholically. I don't recommend grins. Maybe a cat girl, we have cat girls, right?" I wondered, a bit confused. "Felinids, my lord. Your wolf would be more acceptable," he answered with a nod at Canis, who tilted his head in confusion. "Not sure if cats or dogs are more acceptable for heretic relations. Better stick with organs. Some of them are even smaller than you," I commented wisely. "Woof," the space wolf agreed after measuring the lamenter for height. "For the Emperor and the Primarch," Semnai proclaimed and smacked his chest loudly. "Give them hell, Semnai," I answered with a grin. In an hour, a sacrificial corvette with an exterminatus warhead entered the rift, carrying Brother Semnai, while I struggled to follow him with the sounding board's empathic tracker. "It's a very long rift, my lord," he muttered while purple walls flashed by. "Keep your eyes opened for any ships. We always need more ships," I advised him seriously. "Seriously? You're trying to loot more? I think that's an Apocalypse-class battleship," Semnai muttered as the corvette passed the old relic. "Stop and touch it. With your hand," I demanded on a whim. "That's insane. This is a Chaos Warp Rift. There might be 1 billion demons outside the hull," the lamenter lamented in despair. "So? You have an null wand and your body can withstand the vacuum for hours," I answered without any worry. "The Emperor protects," Semnai grumbled as he parked the corvette beside the battleship and opened a hangar door to the void. "This is fun, my friend. Now touch it," I demanded again. "This is not fun. It's freezing and my skin is stuck to the hull," he yelled in my mind. "It's only a flesh wound. Now, let's see." Twist, drag, no. Not working. "Back to your original mission, Astartes. We'll have to tractor the battleship out with chains," I said in a sad voice. "If I hadn't lost my dermis for this, I'd be laughing, my lord. Ha ha." It is a bit fun. The Astartes veteran quipped at my misfortune. Damn Tesseract couldn't grab things from another dimension, which sucked though. Chains were so mundane. Following Semnai, there were 100 more corvettes, now equipped with void steel chains that went missing from footfall, and they pulled at the lost battleship like horses on a carriage. With billions of horsepower per engine, but pulling even so. There were other types of methods I could have used, from mind-controlled Navars bioships and mechanical gravity generators, but none of those were quite feasible inside a warp rift. Hours later, as the battleship began emerging from the rift on our side, Semnai finally reached the demon world and fired the torpedo manually. We did cover the weapon in blackstone armor and purity seals, so it should last long enough to reach, well. It was the damned domain of the Chaos Gods, after all. Merely a second after the detonation began, it froze in place. An entire continent of fleshy spires and lakes filled with worms and disease was kept in stasis, even while burning. Who dares? A powerful voice boomed while the demon prince himself appeared to confront Brother Semnai. I dare. Captain Semnai, Lamentor's second company. My brave battle brother shouted and stepped out of his armored ship for a damn stupid duel. Oh? The failed founding? Join me, and you can have immortality and an eternity of pleasure and war, blessed by Father Nurgle. Join me, feast on humanity, and your body will never die. The demon prince announced with a really compelling argument. Well? Those green fangs full of pus and worms look very enticing. Go on, join Corruptus if you really need a lover. I advised Semnai and barely restrained mirth. Ha ha ha. This is the best fun I ever had in my life. A demon prince begging me to join him, Semnai yelled and jumped forward to battle, firing his combi bolt or two. With no effect, as expected. That thing could stop an exterminatus torpedo in mid-explosion. You won't be laughing, very soon, servant of the corpse emperor. Corruptus promised, a bit irate his magnificent offer was refused. Are you praying yet, Rafen? I asked with my real voice. Yes. Now shut up. My bodyguard muttered harshly. Even clad in power armor, and wielding a chronoblade, my captain stood little chance against a demon prince, merely providing me advanced recon data for our own overpowered warp weapon. This new angel was much stronger now, and so large it shouldn't have fit inside my apartment with wings the size of an airplane. But reality was merely a suggestion for beings on this power. These dead eyes though. I would have to do something about them, one day. Hello there. Lend us your sword, mighty angel. I promise I'll visit you on bail very soon. I spoke with a level tone, and poked the thing in its armored knee. Felt solid enough. The creature glanced at my left hand almost curious, then gently caressed Rafen and erased a nasty scar resulted from forgetting his helmet too many times. Then a flash of golden light, and he was gone. A streak of energy passed the majestic light in the opposite direction, making the corvettes and the chains glow golden for a minute, and then Semnai appeared beside me, cuts and tears in his armor healing with golden foam over it. That was our Primarch? My brother asked after removing his helmet and puking his guts out on my carpet. I just shrugged and took out my Necron cleaning wand to erase the mess. Very useful tool, the Xeno vacuum cleaner. Anyway, I'm glad you agree it was a fun ride. Too bad your stomach is so weak, brother. I answered instead. Semnai took out his glove to examine the glowing left hand, as his skin grew back with golden flakes on light. How does it even work? I have a null wand on my hip. The Lamentor captain muttered in confusion. I just raised an eyebrow and held my own left hand out, thin golden veins still glowing from the angel's presence. What blood flows through our veins, brother? Rafen touched his head, where the healed scar was also glowing. We are truly brothers, Semnai. But today, you are sanguineous reborn. Did you get beat up badly? Semnai snorted and glanced at his healing armor. At least tell me when you're summoning another miracle, my lord. I thought I was truly dead this time, and your damn jokes were not helping. The veteran muttered and punched my shoulder. I felt that even through my armor, so he might be a little pissed. You won't die of old age, Semnai. On the other hand, we have a new battleship and it seems almost intact. And now it's gone, until we return home and get it upgraded. I explained in a cheerful voice, and walked out for the bridge. As we departed the warp rift, a flash of light emerged to illuminate the darkness in our wake, then the rift closed abruptly. I was quite confident of the success of our deep strike, as the demon should have been easily defeated by our angel, and the exterminatus had resumed its explosion, with cleansing effects. I still had plenty of munitions left, and plenty of chaos traitors to hunt down and burn, plus the usual pirates and orcs. Should keep my fleet busy for a few years, and who knows, there might be more rogue traders around to recruit into my alliance. 2 months later, we had just demolished a Death Guard fleet over the fortress world of Komarek, and I even captured a certain Typhus, the so-called Herald of Nurgle. I wasn't sure what to do with him, since his body was a nest of plague insects that were constantly trying to escape the Tesseract labyrinth, even when surrounded by tyrannid bioships. He wouldn't keep, so I just materialized him into Komarek's son, without his armor. The armor and his Manreaper demon weapon would sell pretty well, if you knew certain collectors. Maybe another giant space Hulk, spread among my friends in the forges. Yeah, probably something like that. Decision made, I returned to my fucking duty, and continued pounding my current ally, a certain rogue trader lady named Aspice_Corda. She might be a ruthless captain, but in bed all cats are black. It took me quite a few hours of hard work to break her willpower, but in the end the result was always the same. Please, my lord. No more, I will break, Aspice whispered in bliss. Is that what a slave would say, my dear? I asked curious. No more slaves, or drugs. I'll hunt pirates or Xenos, just let me rest. The woman pleaded with a pitiful voice. I turned her over, and massaged her heavy breasts while she swayed in a daze. You could be so great, my dear. Your own kingdom and armies, fleets of warships and cargo vessels. Have admirals beg for your help, even lead crusades and conquer 100 worlds. Her eyes opened in a suspicious stare, days gone and a ruthless trader back in charge. And for this, what do I have to trade? She asked in a level voice. Blood. Your family and mine, mingled in marriages until you are all blanks, immune to chaos and mutation. Let's say you visit Brycantia in a few decades, with 100 blank men to trade to the Iron Knights. Your blank women as captains, your troops armed with sentinels and gunships. And even that, it's nothing to what the Blood Angels' successors chapters would be willing to trade, to be rid of their blood curse. The Flesh Tearers, for example. That name is not an euphemism, my dear, I said in a teasing voice, making the hard work ahead sound like paradise. Aspice began riding me harder, eyes glazed with desire. I will need to set my entire clan on this, pump out babies as fast as possible, starting with this one. You'll need to release your sisters from stasis, and convince them to contribute. I can spare 2 weeks to make sure you're all with child. I proposed in a flat voice. The woman grunted and slammed into my lap harder. Not what I imagined for them, but sure. You're very convincing too, my lord. I'm sure between the two of us, we'll form a tight bond and keep an ear for other possible allies. Free captains that need a home, destitute rogue traders with a warrant but no ships, rogue navigators, and all those other cases of potential profit, I demanded in a serious voice. Lady Aspice leaned closer to offer me her breasts, and signaled her acceptance. It wouldn't be an easy alliance, but it will work in the end. All I needed was to pass 2 of my assassins as distant cousins and insert them inside her crew, and soon enough all potential obstacles will start having accidents and food poisoning troubles. By the 3rd week, I had all 5 quarter sisters in my bed, eager to carry my children and get rich for it. The rogue trader men would be much harder to ally, simply because they already had as many women they could want. Simply visiting some feudal world could provide him with 1,000 beauties that worshipped him like a god, descending from the sky on wings of fire. Human lives were cheap in the galaxy, especially for those with spaceships and power. I could provide them with an upgraded Los Angeles-class destroyer, and that would cement an alliance for decades. Might do that anyway, just to spread new technologies everywhere. Ask for their daughters, perhaps? Marry them to my sons and grandsons? That might work, eventually. In the worst case, accidents could happen and that daughter would remain the sole heir. With a flick of my fingers, I sent the 5 women back on their ship, letting them sleep in their own beds. I sensed a certain inquisitor arrive in the system, and had to clear my schedule for her. Soon enough, Rose arrived with Sister Alana and a new silent sister named Asuma. A flurry of finger talk began, the woman demanding a million questions without stopping. I just gently took her hands and drew the untouchable woman into a hug. "You're home now, Asuma. Keep silent if you want, but know I will always hear you." I spoke directly in her mind. The woman hugged me back, while tears filled her eyes. "I'm so glad," she whispered back in my mind. "You must be hungry. Steak or Nutrigruel?" I asked to make sure. Asuma kissed my neck in silence. "Just let me hold you a minute longer, Lord Pef. And then we can have that steak," she asked in my mind. As more and more Imperial forces were gathering in the Entian sector, I considered my duty here finished. I did accomplish most of my objectives here, from capturing 1,000 more ships and burning 1,000 Chaos vessels, then stealing a Blackstone fortress and a Gloriana-class battleship, plus 3 others of small size. My current fleet of 2 battleships, 2 battle barges and 40 cruisers paled in comparison with Battlefleet Gothic, which had 6 battleships and 400 cruisers of all sizes. It took them a bit long to gather, but when they did, that fleet was formidable. And then, there were a dozen Astartes chapters, Sisters of Battle with flying cathedriums just as large as battleships, Inquisition forces, Death Watch forces, Adeptus Mechanicus and more. All led by Lionel Johnson, as the guy wanted to gather reputation and followers. I wasn't a follower though. Plus I didn't like burning innocent people that much. Couldn't stop it, but I wasn't going to participate either. My fleet sneaked away, most Lancefire ships heading for home with illegal loot via the Moor Warp Gate, while the 2 Lamenta battle barges and the inquisitorial Black Ship battlecruiser set forth for Forge World Cypramundi, and then for Vigilus. I carried the illegal loot in my tesseracts, and resumed my regular schedule of STC repairs. I did recover a number of new STC templates during my looting of Footfall. And then there were the 1,000 new Silent Sisters recovered by Rose from their hidden planet, which will need to help me produce even more blank children. There was no need to force them either. Once the plan was laid out, for the salvation of the human race with our blank genes, there were hundreds of silent volunteers already. I was most interested in using the STC of the Ragnarok tank hull, which had a simple but rugged drivetrain, and modern-looking tracks. These machines could be mass-produced with ease, and replace most of my tanks in the Auxilia and even the proper Lamenta armored forces. Various patterns with flatter turrets and different types of guns and secondaries scrolled on my cogitator's holoscreen. Magma cannons, volcano lances, siege cannons and even Vulcan Gatling guns, plus cheaper versions with twin las cannons and Vanquisher cannons for anti-tank warfare. For the cost of a single Baneblade I could have 30 such tanks, and they'll move faster and require less fuel. My Rose sat in my lap while I worked, sometimes providing insights into what to expect from various Xenos or traitor units. "You seem to like these ugly tanks very much, my love," she mused and pointed at a low-profile Ragnarok where I was trying to fit a twin multi-laser as a hull gun. "Might need to turn the engine sideways, which would disrupt the balance." "Nah. A single-barrel multi-laser then." There was another multi-laser coaxial to the main gun anyway. The hull would be constructed from cheap plasteel, while the turret would need be cast of adamantium to withstand the shock and recoil. Cover it all in 20 centimeters of Blackstone, and this baby would be more durable than a Baneblade. Only it would weigh 65 tons, not 300 tons. Perhaps make the tracks from adamantium as well? 70 tons now, but the tanks won't be easily immobilized by mines or obstacles. They are the future, Rose. 5 times cheaper than a Lehman Russ and 30 times cheaper than a Baneblade. Just as durable as a Baneblade if not more, I explained while relaxing in my armchair. I've seen the Death Corps of Krieg use something like this, but they all burned up so fast. The Inquisitor mused in a low voice. It's always a trade between numbers or quality. To have both, you need advanced science and immense production capacity. The Imperium's technology is low, and thus we need numbers. The Forges have better technology and thus they can make higher quality products, but in small numbers. The Ragnarok is the middle ground. Any civilized world can make thousands of them, perhaps only armed with las cannons and siege guns, but those are still thousands of tanks they did not have before, I whispered in her neck while fondling her breasts for my own enjoyment. And in space, we'll need those Nova Cannon cruisers instead of tanks. Plus corvettes to serve as infantry. The Inquisitor concluded as she turned to grope me back. Exactly. Now, you want the bed or the ceiling? I asked in a wry voice, and began suckling on those magnificent breasts. Both, I guess, Rose muttered in a breathy voice. Flying the bed to the ceiling was good training for her, as it increased her control over psychopower even during most arduous moments. Still, one day I should get her a null-bone necklace or something, as the big staff joining us in bed was a bit too much. It was mostly the grinning skulls. Not a big fan, although they were very common. Soon enough, a new trade deal was finalized with Forge World Cypro_Mundi. Not as easily as everywhere else though, because this forge was supplying most weapons and ships for the Eye of Terror defenses, and thus it was overseen directly by the Administratum. The bulk of the Segmentum Obscurus fleet was based here, with thousands of ships, forts and naval bases for repair and supply. I promptly ignored all the Navy's Vox messages, letting Rose clear a path for us with Inquisition codes and setting me a meeting with the Fabricator Dominus, on my ship. Lord Lancefire, I heard so much of you, sometimes it sounds as mere legends. Except, Inquisitor Atranius had met you personally and didn't seem too pleased with your conduct. The Fabricator explained while examining my gifts one at a time, 1,000 STC templates going from basic industry to warpless engines and everything in between. Really? I even named the light tank weasel after him. Not the las cannon variant, the one with a heavy flamer. I hummed unimpressed. And this was supposed to burn him, right? You sure have time to waste on petty rivalries, Chapter Master. So, what can my forge do for your August Lamenter's chapter? The Tech Priest asked directly. I will need 1,000,000 tech priests, with their servitors and acolytes to join me in the fringe. With a manufactorum ship, that contains technology to produce Nova cannons and shells. Also, a small group of specialists in archaeotech weapons and warp phenomena, I demanded in a level voice. I could have asked for ships or troops, but means of productions were more valuable, in the long term. It is a harsh demand, but worth it, of course. I expect they will be sent to the new machine forge in your Lancefire domain? The Fabricator asked curious. Probably not, or just a part of them. Most will be relocated to Forge Retribution to work on the anti-Tyrannid fleet. I have 200 old cruisers that will need to be upgraded with Nova cannons and mine-laying capability for Nova mines. Hopefully they'll be ready in 20 years, before the larger Tyrannid fleets arrive. I explained in a gentle voice. The Fabricator froze for a second, before sighing. Well then, I should get started on something like this myself. Do you happen to know a Blackstone planet that my forge could mine? He asked in a calm tone, while his mechadon right tentacles spread incense around us, creating a haze of visible cyber engrams. I nodded wisely, and opened the galactic map on the cogitator. There are 2 places nearby. One is on Vigilus, where I'm heading right now. The other is Sarkon, a Necron world but rather harmless. Bombard them for a few weeks and then you can start mining. I answered, pointing the place on the map. He considered my words for a minute, then nodded. I think I can send an Arc Mechanicus right away to Vigilus, and prospect the place for Blackstone. As for the Necrons, they are really rather harmless. I shall consult my Necron experts and send a few explorer teams first. I just shrugged as he was right to be cautious. As you wish. Anyway, perhaps you have a Titan or 2 with female princeps? We're gathering the core of new Titan Legion there, called Deus Ex Machina. For now, only tentative prospects, but I expect to produce Warlord Titans there in a few decades. Fertile female princep, I suspect. Perhaps one could be sent, if my forge obtains a Blackstone mine too. Your battle barges are covered in meters of it, and I can barely find small plates for Astartes power armor. The tech priest complained and twirled a few tentacles in disgust. I raised an eyebrow and smiled. As it happens, I do have a hangar filled with Blackstone. Merely half a megaton, but if you needed it that badly, it's a gift. I offered grandly. Then immediately filled an empty hangar with Blackstone, from my own reserves. Yes. I mean, thank you, Lord Lancefire. Now, what kind of vehicles could I gift you? He asked and produced an impressive list. I searched through the list for a long minute. Most of the equipment would be useless to me, or I had better. Nova shells, 5,000. Exterminatus cyclonic torpedoes, 100. Vortex torpedoes, 50. And all sentinels and hydras. It's only a few thousands anyway. The fabricator hesitated for a minute, no doubt considering 1,000 factors I had no idea of. You will get the torpedoes in 20 years, Lord Lancefire. The Nova shells will be loaded on the promised Excel Manufactorum. As for the light vehicles, it would take a week to load them on your ships. He answered in a heavy tone, probably making sure he receives the Blackstone at the same time. Very well, fabricator. Make sure to mark everything as donations to the Lamenters chapter. I rather not pay taxes for killing Xenos. Of course, Lord Lancefire. A pleasure meeting a fellow man of culture. The tech priest quipped on his way out. Well, it went good enough then. Hydra anti-air tanks and Sentinel walkers were always in short supply, despite their ridiculous effectiveness per cost. All infantry regiments could gain an amazing boost in firepower and versatility, if only somebody updated the damn regiment charts. 2 weeks later, we reached Hive World Vigilus, a place of immense importance in the future. Right now it was a mess of usual imperial corruption, chaos cults and gangs, starved laborers and pampered nobles. Too bad for them, right? The already classic as a problem, become the solution should work just fine. I even had a friendly Inquisitor and an Archmechonicus on my side, eager to help me repel the invading orcs. I think Rose glared at me for a second, when the alerts blared with warning of an impending war. Sure, it was merely a fragment of a space hulk and 100 ships plus hundreds of rocks, but their orc boss was determined to loot the force fields, and his underlings obeyed without question. Mind-controlling the orc boss was kinda difficult, but a vague targeting direction could be given through the living rock wires in his brain, just like I did on Footfall. It was even the same orc, because learning how to control another one would be tiresome. We head for the cog hummies. Wha? The boss yelled, invigorating his frozen boys. Wog. I leaned in my command chair as the Vox messages for any help were typed and printed on the holoscreen. Radio silence was very useful for moments like this. What say you, Lady Inquisitor? Should the defenders of humanity intervene, or do we wait for the Emperor's tarot to decide? I asked in faint amusement. This is not as funny as you think it is, Lord Pef. There are over 100 billion, maybe 150 billion people on this world. The slightest disruptions in production would cause trillions of thrones in damage, not to mention famine and riots once services stop working. She explained in a grim tone. Exterminatus then? I proposed with a shrug. This is not Pythos. And I'm sorry your efforts were wasted on that world. I'm certain you could have saved the planet and the locals, if you had a free hand. The Inquisitor murmured in a softer voice. You bet your bouncy ass I could have. I had already beaten Chaos and the Orcs. But alas, the Grey Knights are morally grey. Anyway, permission to pacify this world, Inquisitor? I asked in a somber voice. Try not to kill everyone, she murmured in a cold voice. You heard that, Brother Semnai? As long as a single local survives, we're good, I shouted towards my captain. I'll try to restrain myself, my lord. I'll head down with the troops then. He replied in a level voice, and possibly not amused at all. I closed my eyes and began scouring the Hive world for secrets and loot, while chaos cults were either peppered with grenades, flicked into the sun or on board the orcs' ships to give them something to do. Landers filled with my own tech priests and servitors began landing at the major Hive cities, and kept disgorging combat servitors, supported by armed sentinels and recon drones. It was all a show anyway, as the lower Hive levels were already being flooded with narcoleptic gas bombs and even more servitors and tech priests. Same for the crashing rocks, that didn't hold thousands but millions of orcs, all eager to obtain the force fields of the Coghummies. Was I being a calculated bastard? Sure I was. But the STC force fields found on Vigilus were kept secret, when they should have been shared with all the forges at least, if not other Hive worlds too, plus the Astartes. Magically, more and more orcs began bypassing the defenses of the local tech priests, especially around Megaborealis and the Turingspan data hives, the two main centers of the Mechonicus on this world. In the chaos of the invasion, most of the ancient devices and cogitators vanished, while crude orc bombs detonated among the invading orcs, spreading flammable gas and shrapnel. My knights and titans landed to defend the perimeters, along with my armored forces, while the Lamentus Astartes bravely entered tunnels and conduits to exterminate the green scum. In other hives, my tech priests and servitors were already hard at work, processing the gangers and other criminal prisoners into more servitors with crude hypnocants and lobotomic macro-conversions. A single orc rock landed on the pyroclastic districts and detonated with the power of a dozen plasma torpedoes, incinerating the radical cultists led by Vanadan, the firebrand. A proper death for such a hero, no doubt. More rocks landed onto the Dontoria hive sprawl, the headquarters of the ecclesiarchy. Mostly to keep the priests busy, as they had big armies around them, mostly fanatical PDF troops and Adeptus Sororitas forces. I thought the cult was not allowed men under arms. I mused as the holoscreen recorded thousands of armed men with armor and swords fighting to protect the holy bishops and the coterie of priests and acolytes. They're crusaders. But way too many for comfort, that's true, Rose murmured with a frown. A nearby orc rock exploded with a melter torpedo charge, immolating most of the crusaders and 100 priests. Problem solved. Huh? Not that many anymore now. The Emperor was possibly displeased, I said in a dismissive voice and switched focus on the Dirkton hive sprawl and hive Ankar Tertius, where most of the Genestealer infestation were focused. Kinda easy to find simply because the infected resisted narcoleptic gas, due to their Xenos genes. Made it easy to fling them into the sun if millions of them were still standing while the normal humans were falling asleep. Alana, take your sisters and breach the warp storm around the Void Claw. Drag it out a little. I sent mentally to my beloved pariah. Moving the Void Claw weapon was very difficult, even with 1,000 pariahs to hold the storm at bay and a battle barge pushing it out, but we eventually did it. I yanked the weapon inside the labyrinth and placed it beside the Light of Terror, the Gloriana-class battleship. It was almost half as large, and I could bet it would take lots of work to make those two ancient war devices together. But it would be worth it. A few days later, only sporadic fighting still happened, mostly around the priest areas which did not receive nor request support. Governor Agamemnus, why do you not have troops defending the hive cities and the orbit over your planet? Surely you cannot lack men, or women. I asked the idiot noble over Vox. We have the Vigilant Guard, but most of these PDF regiments are beholden to the ecclesiarchy. As for other assets, we have no money. He complained in a scared voice. You will cease any payments to the disloyal regiments and send their roosters to me. Then you will raise 3,000 new infantry regiments, 2,000 for the Imperial Guard and 1,000 as defense forces. If your world is overpopulated, the natural solution is to export manpower. The Mechonicus will provide them weapons, and engineers, and you will provide an officer corps. No priests, or at least no local priests. They can snatch priests wherever the Astra Militarum sends them, I commanded in a cold voice. That's too overbearing. And we will lose production. He muttered in a low voice. There are a billion new servitors getting prepared by the tech priests right now, Governor. All former ganger and criminals, as proven by their tattoos. Also, there is the matter of payment for my losses. You will provide 10 million young women for my aid, I demanded in a stern voice. Of course. 10 million is perfectly fine. The noble agreed gladly. 10 million, every year for the next century, Governor. Forge World Cypramundi will provide transport, in exchange for mining rights for some dark stones they need. And then, I want you to set up 1,000 orbital forts, using metal asteroids as a base. Next time you might not have a friendly fleet nearby to save you. And don't forget the Eye of Terror next door. Perhaps negotiate with the Mechonicus to install a Geller field over the planet. I'm sure they can also use manpower. I explained in a gentler voice. The governor nodded in defeat, not that he had much choice. I only had Sanguinius and the Emperor as my direct commanders, and they were both slightly indisposed right now, with a terminal case of sword poisoning. Soon enough, the Archmechonicus had located their Blackstone deposits and was glad to be given free exploitation rights, even if they'll have to set up forges and arm the forts and the new regiments. As for the ecclesiarchy, I wasn't going to step into that mess under my own name. I just recommended the converted and now unpaid regiments to be offered as trade to the Mechonicus or the Astra Militarum, or maybe split among them. I also must have received over 1,000 vox calls from nearly everyone in any position of power, which I just ignored. Politics wasn't really my strong suit, or even my medium suit. Rose spoke with some 30 people, and only killed one, which meant she was using huge restraint probably. I think I need to visit Terra soon, my dear, she whispered the day before we were supposed to depart. Close your eyes then, and think of the Emperor. Hold your hands out, I asked her while taking the staff away. Oh, I have so much control now, she realized after being detached from the null staff. I brought the shadowlight out for a second and then put it back in, as Rose began glowing with shades of gold and blue. The Emperor, my dear, I sent into her mind. I see his light so clearly now. I really have to go, she exclaimed in a loud psychotone that pushed all furniture aside. Not so much control now, my dear new alpha-level psyker. So, I dropped the staff back into her hands, cutting off the warp and leaving only a small bloodline flaw. Take Janus to the Golden Throne. And, tell him, the code word is Adepta Tertia. He will surely remember. I advised my dear Inquisitor as her glow diminished and vanished under the null rod's effect. What, you're serious? Rose asked in a worried voice. I'm sick of that vow of tranquility. If he wants my girls, he can simply speak. And give Janus her due, I demanded in a low tone, then sat in my armchair with a sad face. He is the Emperor. You cannot demand things, Rose whispered in a frightened tone, holding her hands in prayer. I don't need anything for myself, dear Rose. He needs my help, and he has to pay for it. The throne is already failing, that's why he's calling you. You'll see, I whispered in her mind, finding her mental defenses 100 times stronger now. Rose just blinked and vanished in a blue flash, returning to her own battle cruiser. She wasn't too happy with me right now, but I knew better. I was a rogue trader, and I feared nothing. I have helped Hive World Vigilus survive the worst now, especially by bringing a Forge World here to construct more weapons and defenses. And if the governor listened and paid for a reality cage, he should be golden. Plus, I had been eradicating every cultist and gene stealer I could find, and most of the criminals. Sure, new criminals will appear soon enough, but with more regiments being raised and sent off-world the population crisis will diminish, not that I haven't already did my part for that. Even importing 10 billion women away over the next century. As for loot, it was quite amazing, both hidden caches of weapons and gems, some noble house relics and art if nobody could spot the disappearance, church relics, thousands of bolter guns from the Adepta Sororitas, and most importantly Mechonicus devices of 1,000 kinds, including Dark Age of technology devices and memory modules. It would be useless to let the Mechonicus worship them, when I could just ask Trazyn to decrypt everything and prepare 1,000 new STC templates based on those advanced discoveries. As for the Void Claw weapon, it fired black holes, bypassing any shield or armor. The best big gun any captain could have on his ship. Of course, you would need a big ship to house and protect the weapon, that's why a Gloriana battleship was ideal. And you know who was most vulnerable to gravity weapons? The Tyranids, and their gravity drive. One couldn't fight trillions of space bugs with mere cannons. There weren't enough Nova shells in the universe for that. Even a small fleet depleted my entire stores of torpedoes and Nova shells or mines. As for the Blackstone fortress that will take the entire machine forge decades to clean up and make functional again. Maybe Zorhulash will be able to help with that. It could also serve as a potent mobile base, like the Phalanx. But the most important function of that fortress was not size and armor, but the ability to fight off warp rifts, something that Trazyn had proven even before obtaining Psi Titans. I wouldn't mind having a big mobile base like the Dark Angels or the Iron Fists though. It would raise the status of my chapter, and the Gloriana battleship even more. I would need a grand name for the fortress though. Black Lament, maybe? Or something more poetic like Melancholia? Not sure. And not important right now. I raised my eyes and measured the new Princeps pilot standing in my office. Zeta Roletti. Such a poetic name, the Mechonicus gave her. It's only you, and no Titan? I asked with a frown. I haven't actually driven a Titan either, The tech priests were mean to me. The girl complained in a weak voice. Then again, giving a 12-year-old a titan was quite risky. She might throw a tantrum and stomp 1,000 people. And how was this a fertile female princeps, except by mere marginal technicality? Damn fabricator. No force fields for you. Well, maybe in 20 years. It's okay. We do have a dozen titans and no pilots for them, I said instead, watching Zeta glow with joy. Really? Even a warhound would be great. I promised I won't crash it, she yelled and jumped to hug me. I just sighed inward. There is still more training to be had, Zeta. Tactics, battlefield coordination, combined arms and so on. I know, Lord Lancefire. It takes 30 years to train a princeps. And then they sit in stasis until they are called for battle, for the glory of Omnisire. The girl exclaimed and sat in my lap. What are you doing? I asked, curious. I was told, you will have me make babies? She asked cautiously. Someday, maybe. When you have big breasts to feed the kids. I explained patiently. Milk formula. Zeta muttered in dismay. I still want big breasts. Anyway, it doesn't mean you won't be given a titan. It only means it will take time until you shoot people. Or Xenos, I said and moved her back in the interview chair. It's okay then. I'll learn and train, and then pew, I shoot bio-titans and Eldar titans or Orc gargants. The girl exclaimed and shot with her fingers to prove her aim. Hopefully not Eldar titans. One day, they'll be our allies, I said with a wry smile. Is that even possible? Zeta asked in confusion, and scratched her mop of red hair. It depends, who rules the Imperium and who rules the Eldar. I can bet a throne it will be Primarch Guilliman for the Imperium, though. He is rather famous and trusted. I answered with a giant smile. The girl nodded slowly, and measured me with new eyes. You're not as naive as the fabricator said. He thinks you're a hopeless idealist that will get eaten by tyrannids, Zeta whispered while looking around anxiously. I sighed inward and slumped in my chair. That fabricator again. Here, a data slate with all my campaigns, from when I was 18 years old and became a ship captain, till now. Study and memorize it all. There will be tests, I demanded and took out my personal logbook. Perhaps I should make that my first gesture to all new encounters. Primarch Khan also studied my logs, and he seems to be doing well enough now. Only lost 2 battles in the south. For someone who doesn't cheat, it's pretty amazing, really. Then again, he has 3 Titan legions in his Grand Khan army now, plus 20 Astartes chapters. It would be hard to lose, once you get sufficient firepower on your side. I can't even imagine so many troops. The other Primarchs are also gathering forces, mostly successor chapters and unknown foundlings, plus whatever other troops and ships that gather to their banners, with Roboute way ahead by orders of magnitude. Aren't we heading for the Eastern Fringe? The girl asked while checking the ship's course. We're taking a shortcut through the Maw Warp Gate. Saves us 60,000 light-years of travel. I answered absently. Isn't it risky? Zeta asked a bit cautious. It's 1 billion times safer than traveling through the Immaterium. Which we are not, with the new warpless drives, I said raising my eyes from my own datapad. Maybe one day, there will be warp gates at every forged world. If only we could discover that STC. They must have been made by the ancestors, right? The new princeps asked a bit too hopeful. I'm certain a Margus explorer is looking for it right now. I answered confidently. It won't take much longer, if Jiren had already found the Speranza. By next month, I arrived at Forge Machine with a new princeps, and unveiled the Blackstone Fortress to the gathered tech priests. We had gathered millions of tech priests from dozens of forged worlds, and with their aid and the artifacts in my possession, namely the Hand of Darkness and Eye of Night, it should be quite possible to restore it to functionality. And then, there was a certain Catan who wanted to see me, and a couple of Inquisitors. Now, Lady Ashuria_Indries was always welcome, but the new one, Inquisitor Katarina Greyfax, was unexpected. Lord Trazin, great work with cleaning up warp rifts and storms all over the segmentum. Almost like you're preparing for something. Something involving Inquisitor Greyfax, perhaps? I asked curious. Lord Lancefire. It took me decades, but I did figure out your identity. And you even have a space wolf," the Necron Overlord exclaimed in joy. "Well, I was busy hunting down various Chaos Champions and Princes. Perhaps you would like a memento? A famous blade named Reaper?" I proposed and sent it over right away. It wasn't of any use to me, but surely the Necron collector would like it. "It is a nice toy, Lord Lancefire. I have been reading about your life. It does seem rather extraordinary, perhaps more so after we started trading, correct?" Trizin asked, holding out a copy of my personal logbook. I glanced at Zorhulash and he nodded slowly. So I stepped from the Pharos, right in front of the Necron, for a face-to-face meeting. Not quite equals, but I had a Blackstone fortress too. And other presents. "I expected you to be taller," I said, blurting the first thing on my mind. "And still impossibly brave. Even in my own fortress," the Necron exclaimed in surprise, using his vox box to speak. "I have nothing to fear, Lord Trizin. I expect you wanted me here for a reason?" I asked instead. "Indeed, I wanted that. Come, let's visit my collection and trade for real this time. I feel you have so many nice things to offer." He proposed and gently gestured us to walk towards a greenlit hallway. Even though I had quite a treasure of loot now, Trizin had me beat, as the guy had been collecting for millennia and from different timelines too. Sadly, unique items or people didn't interest me that much, except for the Adeptus Custodes. I just stood in front of the frozen man, knowing the Emperor still saw me through the gold eyes. It wasn't like distance or time were any obstacles for a being of that caliber. He possibly sent the Custodes here just to keep his eyes on what Trizin was doing. "This weapon is called Dracnion. It is not really a weapon though, but something between a greater demon and an Empyrean one," I explained, drawing out a Baden sword, who changed shape into a lance in my hand. "Not all that funny, you crazy demon, but I was named Lancefire here." "How are you not dead?" "The thing reeks of warp and death," Trizin yelled and drew back. I twisted the weapon and drew a line on the green floor. Blackstone parted without effort, scratching a deep gouge on the floor and leaving a small tear in the stasis field. "Warp, you say? Is it good to eat?" I wondered, a bit amused, and vanished the weapon back in the tesseract. Weapon test complete, and nobody saw it. Then I took off my glove, and held my left hand in front of the frozen Custodes, watching the golden veins start glowing. "What is that? I am positive you're not a psyker," Trizin shouted and stepped back again. "My hand is special. But you see, there is nothing to fear, Lord Trizin. Come, show me the orange monkeys now." I spoke in a gentle voice, holding my glowing left hand out towards him. I wasn't sure if my eyes were glowing gold too, but the Necron was certainly impressed. "It's true then. You have some kind of special blood. I had so many plans for you, gonna have to cancel them now." Trizin muttered a bit dejected and poked a wall to reveal the Yoakaro rooms. Now this would be interesting. I wondered if they could speak, or be mind-controlled. I could use my personal Jokero. The Jokero were sometimes used by the Ordo Xenos and the Death Watch to upgrade their own equipment, often to degrees of lethality and miniaturization believed impossible. Trizin had done the same, but gathering hundreds of Jokero in his pens and having them mass-produce exotic devices with technology from 100 Xeno races, plus some human machines like that sleek warlord Titan, which had possibly been a damaged Psi Titan one day, and now looked like an anime dream. It was very possibly as transforming Titan as well, going by the thin rails for the head and weaponry. "That Titan looks familiar," I said, pointing at the suspended walker where some 30 Jokero were busy adding some kind of gravity wings. "It does, right? I was planning to have you as its pilot, but you're not a real pariah." "No matter, I have found dozens of potential pilots anyway," Trizin disclosed with a dissatisfied voice. "Damn madman, you meant having me brain-wiped and slaved into the Titan's command throne? One day you will need to stop having designs on my person, Lord Trizin. It would be a pity if your collection would just explode," I quipped with a level voice, and then went over to the Nullwand workshop, where a couple of orange primates were painting flowers on the warp-canceling weapons. One of them examined me with curious eyes, which locked on my left glove in a second. "Not giving you my Thanos glove, Silly Jokero. I had too much loot stored in those tesseracts, plus a Catan shard. Way too risky. Scylla found your tesseracts, eh? I did find a gigantic garden filled with flowers and butterflies in one of my tesseracts once. And all the orcs inside painted with flower tattoos as well. Trizin admitted with a grumble. Pretty much what I expected. The Jokero were whimsical, and drawn to construct things based on aesthetic more than efficiency. If a tank became 10 times faster a result of the upgrade, it was incidental to the artist's desire to make it prettier. I don't see the Halo devices here. I answered instead, eager to get my hands on an uncorrupted one. I had one recovered from Footfall, but going by how distorted the original user was, I was better off keeping the things locked tight. I only have one left, Lord Lancefire. Currently undergoing calibration on Tyranids, like you have advised me. The other 2 were lost in creative accidents. The Necron complained in a sad tone. So you need a new one then? It might be expensive. I offered and took out the former Xenos with the blob of wires and metal teeth devouring half of the poor creature already. Trizin waved his staff, confining the experiment into a green force field, and then had it vanish someplace. Very valuable, indeed. You had been exploring the expanse too, after all. Fought off Chaos Reavers, billions of orcs, space hulks, and found yourself more ships and weapons, correct? He asked in a knowing voice. This one, it will cost you a Primarch, Lord Trizin. Not yours, mine. I want Sanguinius revived, and back in command of the Blood Angels, I demanded in a stern voice, staring right into his green necrotic eyes. Trizin tilted his head, considering my words. The body would be easy enough to repair. But Primarchs are slightly different from other humans. Their souls. I know. I'll deal with that part. I intervened curtly. So, it is only a loaned artifact then. A test, to see if other dead people can be restored to life. You keep surprising me, Lord Lancefire. But I admit I am curious too. The Necron said in a strange voice, and we both appeared beside Fulgrim's stasis cell. Not a Tesseract transport, something different. Anyways, show no fear, Pef. In a flash, I took out my Athom dagger and sliced through the stasis field, disarming the frozen Fulgrim and grabbing his left arm. Then I turned and held out the bleeding hand as proof. Here, Lord Trizin. Primarch material for my Halo device. What was that? I'm quite certain that stasis field is impenetrable. The Necron grumbled as he grabbed the offered hand. I just shrugged and played it cool. It's a big galaxy out there. And some things are more impenetrable than others. All right. Let's return to my workshop and trade fairly. Not even Greyfax was this obstinate. Which is why I sent her to you. I heard you collect Inquisitors in your big harem. He admitted in a dejected voice, and we arrived in the familiar room where I almost always found Trizin work on various schemes and devices. It took a whole day of using my best rogue trader skills to squeeze a deal out of Trizin, always playing the indifference card. But I did have a big treasury of relics and rare Xenos, including the Hand of Horus, the most powerful power claw in the galaxy. It was a historical artifact, and Trizin had to have it, at any cost. In the end, I got 5 Jokero and the lone Custodes, mainly because Trizin wanted to get rid of him now. Possibly suspecting the same thing I did, after seeing me get recognition from the stasis-held man with golden eyes. Enslaver bone mind shackles, to be fused into the skull of the target and subject to empathic directions were great, as were a crate of more null ones to protect my precious people. Then a dozen more titans including 1 more Emperor class and 3 warlords, fully upgraded to the best possible tech of the machine cult, and an ongoing deal for data mining the Mechonicus memory banks from Hive World Vigilus and producing more STC templates. As for the Halo device, it would take a decade at least to be configured for Primarch use, and not mutate him into a gory abomination. You have to visit me again, Lord Lancefire. You're a bit scary, but I sense no ill intention from you, which is extremely rare for your kind, Trizin declared as we shook hands to seal the deal. Perhaps one day, my robotic friend. Now return me to Machine Forge. Yesterday, a minute before I arrived here, I asked with a slim smile. That's, damn it. So you knew about that. Makes sense now, Trizin murmured as I found myself beside the new Inquisitor, while my older self was just asking Zohulash for advice. The Khatan had seen me appear before I left, which meant I wasn't in any danger. "Lady Greyfax, you look absolutely ravishing, for an inquisitor thought dead for centuries," I proclaimed in a cheerful voice, and patting the woman's power armor pauldron in a friendly gesture. Boob plates were awesome. She also had a hat, which brought me fond memories. She turned and almost shot me in surprise, before stopping herself and examining me with suspicion. "You must be this Pef Lancefire, who rules these stars. And you teleported beside me, with no warp signature. Some kind of unholy Xenos tech?" Lady Katarina asked in a cold voice. "Careful there, my dear. You're the one with Necron mind shackles in your skull. I managed to buy your freedom, but to free your mind we'll need a complicated surgery," I explained with a careless tone, and offered her my elbow. "It always works, even with Inquisitors. I shall need to see Auspex scans of my brain first. Not that I don't trust you, Lord Lancefire, but I don't trust anyone," Katarina muttered as she held on my arm, and we walked towards the biologist ward elevator. "Of course, we will do scans. The tech priests will need to know what to take out, after all. The bionic eye, would you accept a Jokero to look it over? Make it smaller and less intrusive, perhaps install some extra Auspex functions and digital weapons into it?" I proposed as we neared the elevator. She tilted her head in a cute gesture, considering my offer. "What kind of extra functions?" she asked with a frown. "Gene stealer detection, psycho power levels, warp corruption, perhaps a few Xeno signatures from Dark Eldar to Necron and even Tau. We have bulky sensors being built here already from STC fragments, but the Jokero can make everything smaller," I explained as the elevator began descending at speed. The biolabs were 100 kilometers underground, and we had to shift into a new elevator midway as we passed through the kilometer-thick blackstone geoplate separating the construction sections from the research ones. "What? I like keeping things secure and separated, even though we weren't doing virus research here. That I knew of." Verlaine was keeping an eye out for renegade tech priests trying to abuse their freedoms here, but once in a while there would be attempts at radical herotech, like always. People were people, even in 40k. Maybe more so in 40k, due to the entire culture being so distorted. An omnisense eye. It sounds useful, Lord Lancefire. Perhaps later, after I get used to all this novelty. I saw another Inquisitor around, and heard about more, visiting here quite often. Not quite what I expected from a forged world. Lady Greyfax mused in a softer tone. "I do things differently, my lady. But, I also have absolute power here, legally and otherwise. We're not in the Imperium, and thus I speak with the Emperor's voice. And I can enforce that, whenever I wish or have to," I whispered as if it was a big secret. The Order Hereticus Inquisitor turned to measure me again, mulling over my words. "And so it would seem, my lord. So, have you met any of the Primarchs yet?" she asked, changing the subject. "Primarch Khan, yes. We burned down Camorra together. It was really fun," I answered as the biolabs opened in front of us. The woman blinked and tried to see if I was joking. "Fun? Well, I did lose a Corvette, so it wasn't all just blasting away with exterminatus and plasma batteries. But the Primarch gave me battlecruiser to replace my loss, so at the end it was worth it," I concluded as the Magi biologist began setting up the operating table and suspended Auspex scanners. "This way, Inquisitor Greyfax. We'll need to remove all metal objects," Fabricator Gemina asked in a gentle voice, and set up her aides to the task. "Aren't you the Fabricator Dominus of this forge?" Katarina wondered as her power armor was swiftly dismantled. "And the best Archmagos biologist in the fringe, Lady Greyfax. Relax, and sit on the table. I've been dissecting humans for 3 millennia," the Fabricator explained in a rather unsettling manner. "This doesn't fill me with more confidence, Fabricator. How many have you put back afterwards?" the Inquisitor asked while the Mechonicus sensors started flashing and peeling away her pretty red hair. Gemina glanced at me and then stayed silent. "She's joking, my dear. How do you think they are making Skitarii and other servitors? Doing it in reverse, it's much easier," I said gently and took the woman's hand for comfort. Soon enough, A holographic scan was projected above the medical table, with the Necron wires perfectly visible, even interfacing with the bionic eye. "Damn Necron, spying through my eye. Take it out," the Inquisitor demanded in an angry voice. Gemina took that as consent and sprayed her with a paralytic gas, then held a tentacle towards me. "Pass me an Al wand, Lord Peth. She's a psyker and we don't want warp interference, do we?" I took out a wand and handed it over. "Keep it, Lady Gemina. I have found more." It was a rather sensible request after all, and I wanted Gemina kept safe too. "Yes, I expect you have, like always. You want a full medical checkup, for her future children?" the fabricator asked in a casual tone, and began peeling off the rest of the thermal sleeve from the sleeping Inquisitor. I was a bit hesitant, but after seeing that enticing body I gave in. "Sure. Plus vaccines and rejuvenant treatment. And install a mind impulse unit, while the skull is open anyway." "Of course, my lord. We'll take care of her," the fabricator declared and pointed at the door. So, I took out the Nexus Cube and simply moved myself next to Ashuria, 100 kilometers away in another armored bunker. Having fun? I wondered as she observed some worm Xenos getting dissected in the lab below. "Peth, you always find so many nice gifts for me. These Nogi may hold the secret to a new virus bomb, but we'll need more of them," the Inquisitor asked while hugging my side. "Sorry dear. Their home planet was struck with exterminators. Those 20 test subjects are all that's left from their race," I explained patiently. "There were probably a few more, maybe among the Tau, but in too small numbers to matter. What can I say, I didn't like worms that much."